Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. I of course am just another heavy metal maniac, and today I am doing another album review. Today I want to discuss the latest offering from Floridian death metal band Massacre entitled Necrolution. So this released just today on the day I'm recording this, actually, November 8th, 2024. And yeah, this is the fifth studio offering from these this Floridian death metal band. These guys are kind of, they were one of the original, kind of bigger names to come out of that Floridian Tampa death metal scene, alongside bands like Death, Morbid Angel, Obituary, etc. And yeah, their debut album, From Beyond, which came out in 1991, is considered by a lot of people to be a classic, even a staple in the kind of classic Floridian death metal scene. I enjoy that album. I think it is pretty good. It's definitely not like a favorite of mine when it comes to like this kind of style of like old school death metal, but I do enjoy it. They followed it up with the Inhuman Condition EP not long after, which is pretty good as well in my opinion. They broke up not long after that, and then they came back in 1996 with Promise, which is a fucking abomination of an album. I don't know what they were thinking. That is like the worst album like I've ever heard. Like it is so bad. There's nothing redeemable about that album. Then they broke up not long after that, and then they came back in 2014 with Back From Beyond, which is it's a decent album. I don't think it's like outstanding, but it was a decent comeback album, I guess. And then they came back in 2021 with Resurgence, which again was decent, but not like super like outstanding or anything. And now they're back with this album, and so yeah, I guess now we get to kind of like the review portion of this album now, or of this video, sorry. So yeah, this album, if you know Massacre, then you kind of know already what to expect from this band. They haven't really kind of changed a whole lot over the years, unless you count Promise, which they definitely, I'd say, devolved for that album, because god, that album is so unbelievably bad. But yeah, for the most part, this band is very consistent. Like, if you know even if you've only heard From Beyond and you haven't heard Back From Beyond or Resurgence, you kind of know what to expect from this band. Like, this is very just old school death metal, very much in the vein of, like, I'd say Death, like, because obviously From Beyond, half of the half of the lineup that was on Death's Leprosy was on From Beyond. And so yeah, very much in the vein of like kind of Death. With a lot of these songs, there's a lot like thrashy riffs in here too. And Cam Lee, he's a solid vocalist, definitely not like a favorite of mine, but he is definitely a solid vocalist. I think he's kind of a distinct vocalist. He has a very kind of recognizable kind of death growl. So yeah, if you are familiar with Massacre, then you already know what to expect from this album. But honestly, I feel like they just could have done more. Like, this album to me was just kind of like a lot of it kind of just felt like missed opportunity. Really, like, for one, there is 16 tracks on this album, and I don't see the reason why there had to be that many tracks on this album. Like, I feel like you could have, there's 1, 2, 3 interludes on this album, and honestly, you could have just cut out those interludes, honestly, and really nothing of value would have been lost, and then you could have probably cut out a few of these tracks as well, just because, again, I don't see why this album needed to be 16 tracks long. You could definitely trim it down to like 10 maybe, and you would still have pretty much the same album. I think this album starts off like pretty strong. Like, the first track, Fear the Unknown, I thought was like pretty good. It's like, okay, this is just some, just some pretty ripping, pretty just, aggressive old school death metal, and then they followed that up with like a little interlude, which again, interludes don't really need them. Ritual of the Abyss I thought was also a pretty decent song. Most of these songs aren't very long, like, at all. Like, the longest track on this album is 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so for the most part, a lot of these songs aren't very long really at all. And some other songs are decent, like Death May Die, which I believe was the first single that was released for this album. I remember just because they came out with this like terrible album art for that single at first, and I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing? That looks so awful. So Death May Die, I thought that song was like pretty decent. The Color Out of Space, which I believe was the second single for this band, that was also like pretty decent as well in my opinion. But for the most part, while this album started out strong, I feel like the energy just kind of waned as the album went along, I feel like this band, they just kind of really started to play it safe. Like they really, like I said, this band, they haven't really evolved a lot, and they kind of, I guess they kind of haven't had to really evolve because they've managed to stay somewhat relevant in the death metal scene for just being them, I guess. But I feel like they really just kind of played it safe and just kind of, I don't want to say like generic, but honestly it was kind of just a bit generic, and a lot of these songs at the end, they just kind of started to like blend together, and nothing really stood out to me a lot with this album. So yeah, it started off pretty strong. Songs like Fear of the Unknown, Ritual of the Abyss, I feel like are honestly pretty good, but I feel like those songs just kind of ended up repeating themselves as this album went along. I feel like they just kind of recycled a lot of the same kind of ideas on this album. So yeah, the songs on this, most of the songs on this album, I just kind of really don't care for. Like, you could really, like, honestly, you could just trim this whole album down to like a 5-song EP, and I feel like it would have been a more memorable listen, honestly, because again, a lot of these songs just kind of all just blend together. Nothing really jumps out at me. So for me, I don't think this is a bad album. I think the production on it is honestly pretty good. It's definitely not more, it's not like too modern or polished sounding. It's definitely still just got that kind of dirty, gritty, old school death metal sound. Cam Lee, he still sounds pretty solid vocally. Yeah, but for me, this album, it just kind of, for one, I think it's too long. I think there's not enough ideas on this album to really justify the length of this album. And honestly, for me, Massacre really kind of starts with From Beyond and ends with Inhuman Condition. Because honestly, Back From Beyond and Resurgence, I kind of feel the same way about both of them as I feel about this one. So yeah, for me, this is not, I wasn't like overly hyped for this album or anything, and so I'm not necessarily disappointed. I just feel like they could have done a lot more than they did with this album. If I had to give this album a rating, I can't really justify giving it any higher than like a 2.5 out of 5. It's a decent album, but it's not a particularly memorable album. I don't feel particularly inclined to return to it. So yeah, Necrolution, it's okay. I mean, if you liked Resurgence and Back From Beyond, you'll probably like this album. So yeah, do go check this out. Don't just listen to my opinion. If you haven't heard, if you go listen to this album, form your own opinion, obviously. But as it stands, for me, not an overly huge fan of this album. And well, that concludes my review of Massacre's Necrolution. If you made it to the end of this video, you are awesome, and I appreciate you. Do consider leaving a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think about this album? Are there any upcoming albums like that are coming up later that you want me to go over? Because I would be happy to. Leave your comments down below, and do consider subscribing if you're not subscribed already, because I do have a lot more content coming your way. And, well, that about does it. I'm just another Heavy Metal Maniac. I'll see you all sometime in the future. In the meantime, all of you take care and have a great day. So long.